Break your leg right now today, and within hours you'd be in an emergency room. An X-ray would show exactly where the bone snapped. A doctor would set it, wrap it in fiberglass, and send you home with painkillers and instructions. Take away every piece of that: the imaging, the anesthesia, the cast, the antibiotics, and put yourself in the body of someone living 50,000 years ago with a shattered femur. By every intuition you have about medicine, that should be a death sentence. And yet the skeletal record tells a very different story, over and over again. It's easy to assume a serious injury in the deep past simply meant death, quick or slow. No hospital, no morphine, no sterile field. But archaeologists keep finding something that shouldn't exist if that assumption were true. Skeletons with catastrophic injuries that healed. Not just healed badly, but healed in ways that required real, deliberate intervention from other people, sustained over weeks or months. Someone was doing something that functioned in every meaningful sense as medicine. Let's start with one of the most extraordinary skeletons ever excavated, because it single-handedly rewrote what researchers assumed was possible in the deep past. Shanidar 1, a Neanderthal skeleton discovered in the same Iraqi cave system, studied by Ralph Selecki in the 1950s, belonged to a man who lived to what was, for his era, an extraordinarily old age, likely somewhere in his 40s. His skeleton is a catalog of trauma that would be difficult to survive even today. His right arm had been amputated or had withered away above the elbow, likely from an injury sustained years before his death. He had healed fractures in his skull, his ribs, and his leg. He appears to have been at least partially blind, and critically, all of these injuries show clear signs of healing, meaning he didn't just survive the initial trauma. He lived for years afterward, disabled in ways that would have made solo survival essentially impossible in a hunter-gatherer environment. The anthropologist Erik Trinkaus, who has spent decades analyzing Neanderthal remains, including Shanidar 1 in extensive detail, has argued that a man this severely injured could not have hunted, and likely struggled even to gather food independently for extended periods. His survival implies something beyond simple physical healing. It implies sustained social support, other members of his group bringing him food, protecting him, and tolerating the reduced contribution he could make to the group's survival for years, not days. That's remarkable on its own, but Shanidar 1 wasn't an isolated fluke. It turns out severe trauma survival appears with striking regularity across the Neanderthal fossil record specifically. In 1995, the researchers Thomas Berger and Erik Trinkaus published an analysis in the Journal of Archaeological Science, examining patterns of trauma across the broader Neanderthal skeletal record. Their study found an unusually high rate of head and upper body injuries among Neanderthal remains, patterns they compared to the injury profiles seen in modern rodeo athletes, people who repeatedly engage in dangerous close-contact encounters with large, powerful animals. What made the study significant wasn't just the injury rate, it was the survival rate. A large proportion of these injuries, including some genuinely severe trauma, showed clear evidence of healing. These weren't people who got hurt and then quickly died. They were getting seriously hurt, repeatedly, in what was almost certainly close-range hunting of large, dangerous prey, and then living long enough afterward for their bones to remodel and heal. That survival rate only makes sense if injured individuals were being actively supported, fed, and protected by others during a recovery period that could stretch for weeks. The third piece of this puzzle answers a more specific question. Were ancient humans actually setting broken bones, or just letting nature take its course while providing basic care? The paleopathologist Charlotte Roberts of Durham University, whose research focuses on disease and injury in the archaeological record, has documented something crucial in her analysis of healed fractures across numerous prehistoric skeletal collections. When a broken bone is left completely untreated, it typically heals in a noticeably misaligned, often shortened or angled position, because the two broken ends aren't held in place while new bone forms around the break. But Roberts and other paleopathologists have identified numerous prehistoric cases where healed fractures show remarkably good alignment, straight, properly positioned unions that are difficult to explain unless the broken limb was actively set and immobilized during the healing process. This is direct physical evidence, written into the bone itself, that someone understood the basic principle behind a modern cast. Hold the broken pieces still, in the correct position, and give the body time to do the rest. Now let's reconstruct a moment. You are part of a small hunting party, and something has gone catastrophically wrong. A large animal you were tracking turned unexpectedly, and now your leg is broken, badly, the kind of injury that in the wild would typically mean being left behind, unable to keep pace with a group that needs to keep moving to survive. But this group doesn't leave you. Someone straps together two straight branches, padding them with soft plant material, and carefully, painfully, pulls your leg back into proper alignment before binding the splint tightly against your skin with strips of hide. It hurts more than the initial break did. You are carried, or you crawl, or you're half dragged back to camp, an agonizingly slow journey that puts the entire group at risk of exposure or predation while they move at your pace instead of theirs. For weeks afterward, you cannot hunt. You cannot gather efficiently. Someone brings you food anyway. Someone changes the padding on your splint. Someone, night after night, makes the calculation that keeping you alive is worth the very real cost of feeding a person who currently contributes nothing tangible back to the group's survival. There is no guarantee this pays off. You might die anyway, from infection, from the psychological toll of dependency, from 100 things modern medicine would catch early and treat immediately, but the skeletal record proves that, often enough to leave a permanent trace in bone, it worked. Here's the counterintuitive twist. It's tempting to imagine that in a brutal, resource-scarce environment, the logical, almost mathematical response to a severely injured group member would be abandonment, a cold calculation that one damaged body isn't worth the resources needed to save it. But the fossil record argues the opposite. Groups that consistently abandon their injured wouldn't leave behind skeletons like Shanidar 1, a man who lived for years as a one-armed, partially blind amputee in an Ice Age landscape. The evidence suggests something almost inverted from what you'd expect. The harsher and more dangerous the environment, the more valuable a culture of care and mutual support actually becomes. Because everyone in that group knows that the person carrying them home today could just as easily be the one being carried tomorrow. Compassion, in this light, wasn't a luxury layered on top of survival. It may have functioned as a survival strategy in its own right, one that a purely selfish, every person for themselves group would have systematically failed to develop. And that's the part that should genuinely sit with you. Every time you've ever brought soup to a sick friend, driven someone to a doctor's appointment, or simply stayed present with someone who couldn't currently do anything for you in return, you were running a piece of software that has been field tested for tens of thousands of years, refined in exactly the kind of high-stakes environment where getting it wrong meant losing a group member permanently, and getting it right meant something remarkable. Proof, written directly into a 50,000-year-old skeleton, that someone thought you were worth saving. So the next time you break a bone and walk out of an emergency room a few hours later with a cast and a prescription, remember this. The technology changed completely. The instinct underneath it, the decision to set the bone, hold it still, and stay close until it heals, is exactly the same one that kept a one-armed man alive in an Iraqi cave for years, long before anyone had a word for medicine at all.